Ambassador Lee Minjun walked through the grand doors of the Galactic Assembly Chambers. His black diplomatic uniform looked simple next to the bright robes and metallic armor of other species. Behind him, 12 other human delegates followed in a neat line. Their footsteps echoed in the massive hall, built from crystal and steel. The chamber was huge. Thousands of seats rose up in circles around a central speaking platform. Representatives from 200 different species filled those seats. Some looked like giant insects with clicking mandibles. Others resembled walking trees with bark-like skin. A few were energy beings that glowed softly inside containment suits. Lee had been coming to these meetings for 5 years. Today felt different. Today, the humans were here to discuss new trade laws that would affect all human colonies. Earth's people had spread to 47 worlds in the past century. They grew food, built machines, and helped other species solve problems. Chancellor Vexthari called the session to order. The tall, purple-skinned leader of the Dominion Corps stood at the central podium. His forearms gestured dramatically as he spoke. "Today we discuss the new Protection Tax Act," Vexthari announced. His voice boomed through translation devices that every delegate wore. "All junior species must pay for the safety our fleets provide." Lee felt his jaw tighten. Humans were still called a junior species, even though they had been part of galactic society for 50 years. The protection tax would cost each human world millions of credits per year. Credits they needed for hospitals, schools, and farms. "The tax rate will be set at 30% of gross planetary income," continued Vexthari. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even other species seemed shocked by the amount. Lee stood up slowly. His translator badge flashed as he requested permission to speak. "Honored Chancellor, that tax rate would bankrupt most human worlds," Lee said calmly. "Our colonies are still developing. They cannot afford such payments." Laughter rippled through the chamber. High-pitched, chittering from the insect-like Zephyrians, mixed with deep rumbles from the rock-skinned Hegemony Council members. "Perhaps humans should have thought of that before expanding so quickly," said Admiral Crixtall of the Zephyrian Trade Syndicate. Her compound eyes glittered with amusement. "Weak species should know their place." More laughter filled the air. Lee's hands clenched at his sides, but his face remained calm. Park So-young, the human engineering representative, whispered angry words under her breath. Dr. Cho Un-A, their medical delegate, shook her head sadly. Furthermore, Admiral Crixtall continued, "The Syndicate proposes new hyperlane usage restrictions. Species who cannot pay full membership fees should have limited access to major shipping routes." Lee's translator almost couldn't keep up with the rapid clicking sounds that erupted from hundreds of non-human delegates. It was applause. They were applauding the idea of cutting humans off from the galaxy's main trade routes. "Brilliant proposal," called out Counselor Thrak from the Hegemony. His stone-like face showed what might have been a smile. "Junior species use too many resources anyway." Captain Jung Hae-jin leaned forward in her seat. Her military uniform was covered with service medals from peacekeeping missions across the galaxy. She had saved lives on dozens of worlds. Now those same worlds were laughing at her people. "The humans have contributed much to galactic peace," Jung said as she stood. "Our ships patrol the outer rim. Our doctors treat diseases other species cannot cure. Our engineers maintain systems across the core worlds. And we are grateful for their service," Vexthari said with mock politeness. "But gratitude does not exempt anyone from taxes and regulations." The Chancellor's aide, a floating jellyfish-like creature, whispered something in his ear. Vexthari's expression grew more amused. "In fact," the Chancellor continued, "my staff reminds me that humans should be grateful for any scraps of civilization we allow them to participate in. Most species took centuries to reach your current level of development. We have been generous in our patience." Silence fell over the human delegation. Lee's breathing remained steady, but his eyes had grown very cold. Around the chamber, Thousands of alien faces showed satisfaction. They had put the upstart humans in their place. Kim Tae-won, the youngest member of the human delegation, started to stand. His face was red with anger. Lee placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, keeping him seated. "I see," Lee said quietly. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "The assembly has made its position very clear." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a datapad. His fingers moved across its surface, with careful precision. "Then I formally notify this assembly that the Terran Federation withdraws from all galactic accords, effective immediately," Lee announced. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Lee's translator badge flashed again as he listed the agreements being terminated. The Mutual Defense Pact, the Free Trade Agreements, the Scientific Cooperation Treaty, the Medical Aid Compact, the Peacekeeping Accord. All void. The human delegates began standing one by one. They moved with military precision, forming a line behind their ambassador. No one spoke. No one showed emotion. They simply stood and waited. Vex Thari pounded his gavel, demanding order. "You cannot simply leave the assembly. No species has ever been treated with such disrespect while giving so much," Lee interrupted. His voice remained calm, but it cut through the noise like a blade. "We came here as friends. We offered our knowledge, our strength, and our lives for galactic peace. In return, we are called weak and told to be grateful for scraps." The human delegation began walking toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet chamber. 12 humans, in simple uniforms, moving together toward the massive doors. "This is ridiculous," shouted Admiral Krixtal. "Where will you go? What will you do? You need the galaxy more than we need you." Lee paused at the threshold. He turned back to face the assembly of species that had mocked his people. "We will do what humans have always done," he said simply. "We will find another way." The doors closed behind them with a soft thud. In the chamber, 200 species sat in stunned silence. For the first time in galactic history, someone had chosen to leave their civilization voluntarily. Outside, the human delegates walked through empty corridors toward their ship. None of them spoke. None of them looked back. They had work to do. Park So-young looked at her tools one last time. The fusion reactor hummed quietly behind her. She had built this system with her own hands over 3 years. It powered the artificial gravity for all of Kepler Station. 50,000 beings lived here, in comfort, because of her work. Her communicator had buzzed with the message an hour ago. Ambassador Lee's voice was calm and clear. "All human personnel are to return home immediately. We are no longer part of galactic civilization." So-young picked up her toolkit. The Zephyrian station manager had tried to stop her at the door. "You cannot leave now," he had clicked angrily. "Your contract has 2 more years." "My contract was with the Galactic Assembly," So-young replied. "We are no longer members." She walked away without another word. Behind her, emergency alarms began to sound. The fusion reactor was already showing stress signs. Without her daily maintenance, it would fail within a week. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. Dr. Cho Une packed her medical supplies on Rigel the 7th. The hospital staff watched her with growing panic. She was the only one who knew how to treat the local plague that appeared every few years. Her medicine had saved thousands of lives. "Please, Dr. Cho," begged the head nurse, a 6-armed Altarian named Zeekth. "The plague season starts next month. Without your treatments, train your own doctors," Cho said gently. She sealed the last of her equipment cases. "You never wanted to learn before. You said human medicine was too simple." The young nurse's 4 eyes filled with tears. "But we need time to study your methods." Cho paused at the door. Her heart ached for these people. She had worked beside them for 8 years, but the assembly had made their choice clear. I offered to teach classes for free, she reminded Zeke. Your government said human knowledge was not worth official credits. On the trading station Nexus Prime, Captain Jung Hae-jin called her security teams together. 40 human peacekeepers stood at attention in the briefing room. Around them, alien station personnel watched nervously. We're going home, Jung announced simply. Pack your gear. The transport leaves in 6 hours. Commander Drix of the Hegemony Defense Corps stepped forward. His rocky skin showed deep cracks of worry. Captain, we have 3 active conflicts in the Outer Rim. Your teams are the only ones trained in non-violent conflict resolution. Jung's expression remained professional. Then perhaps you should have voted differently. In the assembly, yesterday, the news networks went crazy. Every species had reporters asking the same questions. What would happen without human engineers? Who would mediate trade disputes? Those. What about the deep space patrol routes that only humans seemed willing to fly? On the core world of Dominion Prime, the stock markets crashed. Investors suddenly realized how many systems depended on human innovation. Agricultural worlds used human crop rotation techniques. Manufacturing centers relied on human efficiency improvements. Even basic translation software had been updated by human linguists who understood cultural context as well as language. Admiral Kim Tae-won stood on the bridge of the battleship Seoul. Around his flagship, 200 human vessels waited for orders. They had been patrolling the dangerous Dark Nebula region for 12 years. Pirates and raiders avoided the area because of the human fleet's reputation. Admiral, we're receiving desperate calls from 17 different systems, reported his communications officer. They want to know if we're really leaving. Kim looked at the tactical display. Red warning markers showed known pirate fleets moving toward previously safe shipping lanes. Without the human patrol, those routes would be chaos within days. Send a response to all callers, Kim ordered. Inform them that the Terran Defense Forces are returning to protect human space. We suggest they make their own security arrangements. The officer hesitated. Sir, some of these are worlds where we have friends, people who helped us. Kim's jaw tightened. Note any requests from individuals who aided human personnel. We will offer safe passage to human space for them and their families. Within hours, the offers started coming. Not from governments, but from ordinary beings who had worked with humans. Zeke, the nurse, requested asylum. Engineer Vrix, who had learned human building techniques, wanted to join them. Hundreds of aliens, who had seen human compassion firsthand, chose to abandon their own species. Chancellor Vexthari called emergency sessions every day. The assembly hall echoed with angry voices and desperate proposals. This is temporary, he insisted to the panicking delegates. Other species will fill the gaps. We do not need humans. But the reports kept getting worse. Kepler Station had lost gravity and was evacuating. 3 trade routes were now controlled by pirates. The plague on Rigel VII was spreading to nearby systems. Manufacturing output dropped 20% in the first week. Councillor Thrak of the Hegemony stood to address the assembly. His stone-like face looked older than before. Perhaps we acted too hastily, he rumbled. The humans did provide useful services. Useful? Admiral Krixtal's compound eyes flashed with anger. They were janitors and clerks. We gave them more credit than they deserved. But even she looked worried. The Zephyrian Trade Syndicate was hemorrhaging credits as their shipping schedules collapsed without human logistics coordinators. On Earth, Lee Min-jun sat in his office reviewing reports. Human colonies were adapting quickly to isolation. Without galactic taxes and regulations, their economies were actually improving. The refugees from other species brought new knowledge and perspectives. Sir, his aide reported, we're receiving formal complaints from the assembly. They claim we're stealing their citizens. Lee smiled sadly. Tell them, we're not stealing anyone. We're simply offering shelter to beings who choose compassion over politics. His communication device chimed with another urgent message from Vex Thari. The Chancellor wanted to negotiate. He offered reduced taxes and better trade terms. Lee deleted the message without reading it completely. The time for half measures was over. Outside his window, he could see human ships arriving with refugees from across the galaxy, aliens who had been treated as second-class citizens in their own governments. Beings who had worked with humans and learned that there was another way to live. The galaxy was learning what it meant to lose something precious. But humans were learning something too. They were discovering that sometimes walking away was the first step toward building something better. In the depths of space, human ships changed course for home. Behind them, the galaxy shuddered as civilization began to crack. 6 months had passed since the humans left the assembly. The galaxy was breaking apart. Dr. Cho Eun-ae stood in her new laboratory on New Sol Colony. Through the window, she watched ships arrive every day. Refugees from dozens of worlds came seeking the safety that human space offered. Her communicator buzzed constantly with emergency calls from across the galaxy. "Dr. Cho, please." The voice of Dr. Zalon crackled through the speaker. The Rigel 7th Health Minister sounded desperate. "The plague has spread to 3 more systems. Millions are dying. We need your help." Cho closed her eyes. She had developed the cure for Rigel plague 8 years ago. The formula was simple, but it required understanding how different species' immune systems worked together. Only humans had studied that kind of adaptive medicine. "Have you tried the treatment protocols I published?" Cho asked. "We tried, but without your guidance, we cannot make it work. Please, just one consultation." "Dr. Zelon?" Cho interrupted gently. "6 months ago, your government called my research primitive guesswork. They refused to fund proper medical exchanges with human universities." Silence filled the communication channel. "Children are dying," Zelon whispered. Cho's heart broke. "I know, and I am sorry. But I am no longer part of your civilization." She ended the call and looked at the data coming in from her new refugee patients. Aliens who had fled the chaos in galactic space brought stories that made her weep. The Outer Rim had exploded into violence. Without human peacekeepers, 3 major conflicts had started. The Syndicate Wars, between competing trade guilds. The Hegemony Border Crisis, where 2 rock-skinned species fought over mining rights. The Altarian Independence Movement that turned violent when their peaceful protests were ignored. Captain Jung Hae-jin would have stopped all 3 wars before they started. She had a gift for finding common ground between enemies. Her negotiation techniques were studied in human academies, but dismissed by alien military schools as too soft. Now those same alien commanders were learning what too soft had accomplished. Jung's methods had kept peace for decades in regions that were now burning. On the fortress world of Kepler Major, Admiral Kim Tae-won received daily intelligence reports. The Dark Nebula, once safe under human patrol, was now infested with pirates. 17 merchant ships had been destroyed in the past month. Trade between the core worlds and rim colonies was dropping to dangerous levels. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "the Assembly is requesting emergency military assistance. Pirates have blockaded the Zephyrian homeworld." Kim looked at the tactical display. The situation was simple enough. A human task force could clear the pirates in 6 hours, but the cost was not measured in ships or weapons. "What is our response?" the officer asked. "We are not part of galactic civilization," Kim replied. "Their security is not our responsibility." But the officer was young and had friends among the Zephyrians. "Sir, innocent civilians are trapped. Families we served with are citizens of governments that called us weak," Kim finished. "If those families want human protection, they can request asylum in our space." The irony was bitter. Human space had become the most peaceful region in the galaxy. 47 human worlds, plus 12 new refugee colonies, lived in harmony. They had no wars, no trade disputes, no plague outbreaks. The same species that the Assembly called Junior were building something the galaxy had never seen. Chancellor Vex Thari called another emergency session. The Assembly Hall was half empty now. Many species had recalled their delegates to deal with crises at home. The beautiful chamber looked hollow and desperate. The situation is temporary, Vex Thari insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. We must simply adapt to function, without human interference. Councillor Thrak stood slowly. The hegemony leader's stone face showed deep cracks of stress. Interference? Chancellor. Human interference prevented 6 wars in my sector. Alone. Last year. Their absence proves they were never essential. Admiral Krixtal argued, but her compound eyes kept darting to the empty seats where human delegates once sat. A new voice spoke from the gallery. It was Zeekth, the young Altarian nurse who had fled to human space. She wore the simple blue uniform of a refugee aid worker. May I address the assembly? She asked. Vex Thari looked annoyed. This is not a public forum for, I am a citizen of Rigel VII. Zeekth interrupted. I have the right to speak. Murmurs filled the chamber. Technically, she was correct. Zeekth walked to the central podium. Her forearms gestured calmly as she spoke. I lived in human space for 4 months. I worked in their hospitals, learned their methods, and saw their society. Do you want to know what I found? The assembly waited silently. I found a civilization that actually works, Zeekth continued. No species dominates others. No one is called junior or told to be grateful for scraps. When there is a problem, everyone works together to solve it. Naive idealism, Vex Thari scoffed. Is it? Zeekth challenged. Then why are their worlds thriving while ours burn? Why do thousands of our people flee to their space every week? Why does every crisis here grow worse without their help? Kinsind. Both. Kinsind. She gestured to the empty human seats. You called them weak. But when they left, our strength left with them. Because they were never weak. We were weak for not recognizing their value. The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Some delegates called Zeekth a traitor. Others demanded her removal. But a few, mostly younger representatives, nodded slowly. Back on Earth, Ambassador Lee Minjun read the reports with growing sadness. The galaxy he had tried to serve was tearing itself apart. Every day brought news of new conflicts, economic collapses, and social unrest. His aide brought him another stack of requests. Sir, 43 more worlds are asking for humanitarian aid. The Assembly is officially requesting emergency medical assistance for the plague outbreak. Oh. Lee looked at the formal documents. They were written in the old style, full of bureaucratic language that assumed human compliance. No apology, no acknowledgement of error, just demands disguised as requests. Draft a response, Lee ordered. Tell them we are establishing refugee processing centers at our border stations. Any being who wishes to leave galactic space is welcome in human territory. But not medical aid to the affected worlds? Lee was quiet for a long moment. We offered our knowledge freely for 50 years. They rejected it as worthless. Now they want us to save them from the consequences of their own choices. Outside his office window, another refugee ship was landing. Thousands more aliens seeking the peace that human space offered. They brought stories of a galaxy learning too late what it had lost. The Assembly had wanted to put humans in their place. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. The place they had chosen for humanity was outside their civilization entirely. And from that place, humans were building something new. 1 year had passed since the walkout. The galaxy was unrecognizable. Chancellor Vex Thari stared at the reports covering his desk. Each one told the same story of collapse and chaos. The Dominion Corps faced revolution on 6 worlds. The Zephyrian trade syndicate had lost half its shipping routes to pirates. The Hegemony Council was fracturing as member species blamed each other for their problems. "Sir," his aide whispered nervously, "the Emergency Powers Committee is here to see you." Vexthari looked up with tired eyes. The committee had taken more control every month as the crisis deepened. They claimed it was temporary, just until order was restored. But their methods grew harsher each week. Committee Chairman Torex entered without ceremony. The cybernetic implants on his scaled head glowed with cold light. "Chancellor, we need to discuss the human problem." "What human problem?" Vexthari asked. "They are gone. They are no longer our concern." "They are everyone's concern," Torex replied sharply. "Every day, more of our citizens flee to human space. Yesterday, we lost an entire research station. 300 scientists abandoned their posts to join the humans." Vexthari rubbed his temples with two of his 4 hands. "Perhaps if we improved conditions." "We cannot compete with human propaganda," Torex interrupted. "They promise equality and cooperation. Naive concepts that appeal to the weak-minded." The Chancellor knew better. He had seen the intelligence reports from human space. It was not propaganda. The refugee worlds were genuinely peaceful and prosperous. The humans had built something the Assembly never could. "What do you propose?" Vexthari asked wearily. "Economic sanctions. Naval blockades. We force them to rejoin galactic civilization on our terms." Before Vexthari could respond, alarms began blaring. His communication screen lit up with emergency signals from across the core worlds. On Kepler Station, the artificial gravity had finally failed completely. 50,000 beings were trapped in zero gravity with failing life support. The Zephyrian station manager who had mocked Park So-young's departure was now begging for human engineers to save them. In the Rigel system, the plague had mutated into something Dr. Cho Une had never seen. The death toll reached millions, as local doctors struggled with treatments they did not understand. Refugee camps overflowed with beings trying to reach human space and safety. The Outer Rim wars had spread like cancer. Without human peacekeepers, conflicts that should have ended in negotiations became bloody massacres. Admiral Kim Tae-won's old patrol routes were graveyards of burned ships and failed colonies. Captain Jung Hae-jin watched the news feeds from her new office on New Seoul Colony. The images broke her heart. She recognized many of the worlds now burning. Places where she had helped broker peace agreements, settled trade disputes, and saved lives. A soft chime announced an incoming message. The face that appeared on her screen was unexpected. Commander Drix of the Hegemony Defense Corps. His rocky features showed deep cracks of exhaustion. "Captain Young," he began formally, then his voice broke. "We need your help." Problanen. Jung had served with Drix for 3 years. He was a good soldier who genuinely cared about protecting civilians. "The Altarian independence movement has taken hostages," Drix continued. 50 children in a school on Proxima 7. "Our tactical teams want to assault the building, but the rebels have plasma charges. The children will die." 2. Jung closed her eyes. This was exactly the kind of situation where her negotiation skills had saved lives before. "Commander, I am no longer—" "I know," Drix interrupted. "I know you owe us nothing. But these are children, Captain. Innocent beings who had no part in our mistakes." The video feed showed the school building surrounded by military vehicles. Jung could see the tactical team preparing for assault. She had seen this scenario dozens of times. Without proper negotiation, it always ended in tragedy. "Patch me through to the rebel leader," she ordered. Drix's stone face showed relief. "Thank you." Jung spent 6 hours talking to the Altarian rebels. She listened to their grievances, understood their desperation, and found a solution that saved the children while addressing the rebels' core concerns. It was delicate work that required understanding both species psychology and cultural values. When the crisis ended peacefully, Drix appeared on screen again. "How can we repay you?" he asked. "You cannot," Young replied sadly. "And next time, there will be no human negotiator to call." The same pattern played out across the galaxy. Individual humans helped with specific crises, but only as private citizens offering humanitarian aid. The Terran Federation maintained its complete withdrawal from galactic politics. On Earth, Ambassador Lee Min-jun received a very different kind of message. It came from Zeekth and a group of younger assembly delegates who had been quietly organizing their own political movement. Ambassador Lee. Zeekth's 4 eyes showed determination. "We want to propose something unprecedented." Lee listened as she outlined their plan. The younger generation from dozens of species had studied human governmental models. They wanted to overthrow the current assembly leadership and create something new. A galactic federation based on cooperation rather than dominance. "The old leaders will never agree," Lee warned. "Then we will replace them," Zeekth replied simply. "Many species are ready for revolution. The current system has failed completely." Lee was quiet for a long moment. "And what do you want from humanity?" "Guidance, teaching. An example of what is possible." Zeekth paused. "And perhaps, eventually, partnership with equals." The proposal was tempting. But Lee had seen too much betrayal to trust quickly. "Prove it," he said finally. "Show us that the galaxy can change. Then we will consider rejoining a civilization worthy of the name." Meanwhile, the committee's harsh measures were making everything worse. Their economic sanctions only drove more beings to seek refuge with humans. Their military threats were ignored by a people who had walked away from an entire galaxy rather than compromise their principles. Chancellor Vex Thari watched helplessly as his authority crumbled. The Emergency Powers Committee had effectively taken control, ruling through fear and force. The very qualities that made galactic civilization function, trade, diplomacy, cultural exchange, were being destroyed by authoritarian panic. In human space, the refugee worlds continued to thrive. Beings from hundreds of species lived together peacefully, learning from each other and building something entirely new. They called it the Free Worlds Alliance, and its charter was based on human principles of equality and cooperation. The galaxy was learning what it meant to be truly alone, and in that loneliness, some were beginning to understand what they had lost when they let pride silence the voices of peace. 18 months after the walkout, Ambassador Lee Min-jun received a message that changed everything. The communication came through official channels, but the tone was unlike any assembly document he had ever read. It was simple, direct, and honest. To the people of the Terran Federation, it began. "We have failed. Our civilization has collapsed because we rejected the very values that made civilization possible. We formally request your return, not as subjects or junior partners, but as teachers and equals." The message was signed by Zeekth and 47 other representatives from 32 species. They called themselves the Reform Coalition, and they had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had staged a peaceful revolution. Lee studied the intelligence reports with amazement. The young reformers had organized across species lines, using human political theory as their guide. They held mass demonstrations on every core world. When the Emergency Powers Committee tried to stop them with force, millions more beings joined the protests. The old leadership fell in a matter of weeks. Chancellor Vex Thari was removed from office. Committee Chairman Torex fled to the Outer Rim with his cybernetic followers. The Assembly voted to dissolve itself and create something new, the Galactic Federation of Free Worlds. The invitation to return came with a formal apology and a constitution based on human governmental principles. Lee read the document with growing wonder. It was everything he had hoped for when humans first joined galactic society 50 years ago. But trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. "Sir," his aide reported. The Federation Council is asking for a response. They want to know if you will return to address their founding assembly. Lee looked out his office window. Human space had grown to include 60 worlds now. The refugee populations had integrated beautifully, creating the most diverse and peaceful civilization in galactic history. They called it the Free Worlds Alliance, and it functioned exactly as the new Federation claimed it wanted to work. Schedule a meeting with the Alliance Council, Lee ordered. This decision affects all of us. Now. The debate lasted 3 days. Representatives from dozens of species, former refugees, who had fled galactic oppression, argued passionately on both sides. Some wanted to remain independent. Why should we trust them again? Asked Dr. Gilith, a former hegemony scientist whose research had been stolen by his own government. We have built something pure here. Why contaminate it with their politics? Others saw opportunity in the Federation's promises. If they mean what they say, we can help billions of beings across the galaxy, argued Professor Kelm, an Altarian philosopher, who had developed new theories of interspecies cooperation. Park So-young spoke for the practical perspective. They need to prove themselves first. Let them implement their new constitution. Let them show they can govern fairly for 1 year. Then, we consider rejoining. But Dr. Cho-une brought a different viewpoint. Every day we debate. More beings die from problems we know how to solve. The plague in the Rigel system alone has killed 15 million. How many lives is our caution worth? In the end, Lee made the decision that would shape galactic history. He would return to address the Federation Founding Assembly. But he would bring more than just words. When Lee's ship arrived at Concordia Prime, he was not alone. 12 human delegates accompanied him, just as before. But behind them came representatives from every species in the Free Worlds Alliance. Beings who had fled galactic oppression and found something better in human space. The new assembly hall was different. Instead of raised circles that emphasized hierarchy, the seats were arranged in concentric rings, where every voice was equal. The architecture itself reflected the human principle that civilization required cooperation, not domination. Zeekth, now the elected speaker of the Federation, welcomed them formally. Her 4 eyes showed both hope and nervousness. Ambassador Lee, representatives of the Free Worlds Alliance, we thank you for coming. We know we do not deserve your trust, but we ask for your guidance. Lee stood at the central podium where Vexithari had once mocked human weakness. The chamber was silent, but it was not the hostile silence of 18 months ago. It was the quiet of beings waiting to learn. Speaker Zeekth, members of the Federation Council, Lee began. We did not come here to rejoin your civilization. We came to offer you the chance to join ours. Older. Force. Arends. 70. End quote. End quote. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. This was not what they had expected. Lee gestured to his companions. These beings represent 47 species who chose freedom over oppression, cooperation over competition. They have built a society where no one is called junior, where every voice matters, where problems are solved together. Dr. Cho stepped forward. We offer to share our medical advances with any world that needs them, not as members of your federation, but as fellow travelers working toward common goals. Captain Young spoke next. We offer our peacekeeping methods to any region that wants lasting peace. We will teach negotiation instead of domination, understanding instead of conquest. One by one, the Alliance representatives offered their knowledge freely. Agricultural techniques that could feed billions. Engineering innovations that could rebuild destroyed infrastructure. Social theories that could heal ancient ethnic conflicts. But, Lee concluded, these gifts come with conditions. We will not work with governments that oppress their people. We will not support systems that value some species above others. We will share our knowledge only with those who prove they truly want to change. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some delegates were angry at the conditions. Others were excited by the possibilities. The debate continued for hours. Finally, an elderly Zephyrian delegate named Crixvel stood to speak. She was Admiral Crixtal's daughter, but her views were very different from her mother's. "Honored beings," Crixvel said, 18 months ago, we thought we were putting the humans in their place. We succeeded. Their place was outside our failed civilization, building something better." She gestured to the Alliance representatives. "Now, they offer us the chance to earn our way into their civilization. I say we should be grateful for the opportunity." The vote was close, but it passed. The Federation accepted the Alliance's conditions and began the long process of proving they had truly changed. Lee signed the partnership agreement with mixed emotions. It was not the reunion many had hoped for, but it was a beginning. The galaxy would rebuild itself slowly, one world at a time, under principles that valued every being equally. As the ceremony ended and delegates began filing out, Lee noticed something remarkable. The chamber was not empty this time. Beings from dozens of species lingered, talking excitedly about the future, forming the first tentative friendships across old enemy lines. The galaxy had shuddered in silence when humans marched out of the assembly 18 months ago. But as they walked back into the chamber as teachers and partners, the galaxy hummed with the quiet sound of hope being born. Outside Concordia Prime, human ships waited alongside vessels from 47 other species. The Free Worlds Alliance fleet was not large or powerful, but it carried something the galaxy had lost: the promise that different beings could work together as equals. The stars watched silently as a new civilization took its first careful steps toward becoming something worthy of the name.